high on this. It's a little slick here, but it's a hip right here. Oh, I like that a lot. I like this. Hey, and welcome back to the third installment of E-Mountain Bike Charged. Wow, it took a lot longer than I anticipated to not only complete my first trail, but really get enough ride time in to provide an accurate review, or rather form an honest opinion of the two shocks that I'd like to do a comparison of. The first being the RockShox Deluxe, which came stock on my beloved YT Industries Decoy, and the second being the Marzocchi Bomber CR with the Sprindex adjustable coil. So let's get right into it. Let's start with the completed trail. I'll talk about the progression, the changes, and the final tweaks along the way, and then I'll move on to the shock comparison. Please remember at the end of the video to like and subscribe, and please leave any questions that you may have, and I'll do my best to answer them in the next video. Thanks so much, and I hope you enjoy. So in my last video, I had already finished the step down, the transition, and the berm. I decided I wanted to expand the berm because I thought it would be not only safer, but I thought it would be more fun to be able to just land, rocket in, and then exit out with a little more wild abandon. Having run out of dirt before I could finish the berm and getting a little impatient, I just decided to use a piece of 4x8 plywood that we had laying around left over from a house project. I only meant this to be a temporary solution until I could get some more dirt, but after sessioning it a bunch of times, unexpectedly, I started to kind of dig the slight flex and rebound the board provided when you'd exit the berm. Satisfied with the berm, I decided to move on to the next feature. This feature would be the centerpiece of this trail. I wanted to construct a long, ramped ladder bridge that would lead into a gap. I scouted around my property and I found some fallen trees. I cut these into sections, and I thought they'd be really useful for constructing jumps, transitions, etc. They also turned out to be an amazing rock-solid base for the ladder bridge. I purposely built the bridge in two pieces so I'd be able to change the angle of the ramp. After experimenting a bit, I settled on about 23 degrees. Satisfied with the angle, I pieced together the rest of the ramp and moved on to the transition. So, just like the ladder bridge, I ended up experimenting with the angle and also the height of the transition. I first built it at essentially the same height as the ramp, but after sessioning it a bunch of times, it just was lame, felt boring. It just kind of felt like this quick, short rainbow. And it was smooth, but just wasn't really exciting. So I ended up lowering the ramp, and this made a big difference. So you felt like you just had more hang time in the air. The last change I made to this feature was the small bump jump to get up onto the ladder bridge. The first one was just a short, low-angle dirt bump jump. I ended up changing that because after sessioning it a bunch of times, it just seemed like it was bleeding off too much speed to really maintain a smooth run and exit off the ramp. So I changed this to a longer wood ramp, and this did the trick. I was able to maintain much better speed getting up onto the ladder bridge, and just made it smoother overall and more fun. I finished off the trail with a small but really fun gap jump. Now that all the hard work was done, there was only one thing left to do: ride it. Here's the second run with the overall trail feature dimensions. Off the first ramp, down to a 10-foot gap step down, into the 30-foot long berm with a 3-foot gap at the end, onto the 3-foot gap bump jump, up onto the 18-foot long ladder bridge with a 7-foot gap, down to the transition, and into the last gap, which is also 7 feet. And there it is. Alright, let's move on to the shock comparison. First up is the stock RockShox Deluxe R. What do I like about it? Two things. It's really lightweight, really doesn't get any much lighter. 353 grams it came in at. Also really simple. It's the R, so it literally just has rebound and no compression. It would have been nice to have some low speed compression, just so for like a flowy jump trail or something like that, you just have the ability to just stiffen it up. But certainly by no means a deal breaker. It's not a big deal to just take out the shock pump and put in a little more PSI if necessary. So now let's compare this to the Marzocchi Bomber CR with the Sprindex adjustable coil. Adjustments are rebound and low speed compression, and for me that ticks all the boxes. I never care to have any more adjustments than that. The Sprindex adjustable coil is definitely the coolest innovation that I've seen in years for rear coil shocks. Of course, you've had things like titanium springs, which were lighter, and like MRP progressive coil springs, which enabled coil shocks to be run with suspension designs that were optimized for air shocks, not coil shocks. But this essentially has taken the one advantage that air shocks had over coil shocks, and that was the ability to accommodate a variety of riders' weight, sizes, etc. And now this is actually more convenient. Now you just reach down, turn the dial to your desired spring weight, and make the coil stiffer or softer, as opposed to having to take out your shock pump and make PSI adjustments. And I did this quite often, not only to see if the adjustable dial actually made a noticeable difference in the spring weight as advertised, but also just to see how often I actually used it. And the answer to that would be enough. I used it often enough that I couldn't live without it. I adjusted it back and forth for some rockier stuff that I wanted a little softer setup to be a little more compliant. And then, I'd stiffen it up on some flowy jump trails where I just wanted some more pop off of lips, a little more support on landings, etc. Also, when you get tired, it's nice to have the option to actually soften it up to give your body a rest for those last few runs. So which shock would I choose? That would be the RockShox Deluxe on most of the trails that I ride most of the time. That's to say that, the trails that I'm riding 90% of the time throughout the year aren't the bike parks, which are only open up here in Oregon about 3 months out of the year. So, if it was a choice of I'm going up to Mount Hood Ski Bowl, for example, which really has the best examples of true DH runs, that you have the long, high-speed descents with rock gardens and terrain that your suspension is really pitching back and forth over an extended amount of time, then I'd choose the Marzocchi, but that's only 3 months out of the year. The other time I'd be choosing the RockShox Deluxe, and it's mainly because of weight, and it's where that weight is distributed. It's right in the middle of the bike, and although I'm riding a heavy e-bike, it's with the RockShox on there, it's 53.2 pounds, if I remember correctly, and essentially it's a pound heavier with the Marzocchi Bomber CR, and I didn't think it would make that much of a difference, even though it was distributed in the middle of the bike, but it did. It was more fatiguing. It didn't feel as lively, popping back and forth between small trail features, etc. And that is particularly noticeable when you're getting tired at the end of the day. It's just even more fatiguing, especially when you make mistakes. Here's an example of one of the test trails, a little gem called Quarantine, a little short jump run, but it really exemplified the clear advantage that the RockShox had over the Marzocchi on this type of trail. I'm the lead rider towing my friend up. Well, that wraps up episode 3. Thanks so much for joining me. Please remember to click like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.